Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the OSINT Curious Webcast podcast. I am Micah Hoffman, and I am pleased to present to you my fellow co-hosts. Say hello to everybody, Matthias.
Hey, this is Matthias, also known as MW OSINT. Glad to have you on here.
Good having you on here too, Matthias. And what about you, Nico? You want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Nico, Dutch OSINT guy here.
And Nix.
Hi everyone, it's Nixtintel. Glad you could join us, and thanks for watching or listening.
Cool. And Sector 035.
Hello everyone, Sector 035 here, welcome.
Very cool. And as always, thank you to our wonderful audience, our attendees that are listening to us live. If you have any questions for our special guest, who we'll introduce in just a second, please throw them in the chat and we will bring it up to our guest. Our guest today is actually somebody that you probably have seen on Twitter. His name is Sin Windy. And Sin Windy, welcome to the show. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, as much background as you can, and tell us how you got into OSINT.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me. I am Sin Windy. If it's easier, you can also call me Sin. So getting into OSINT was kind of by chance for me. In undergrad, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I went into grad school straight out of university and ended up going for intelligence studies. So that's where I kind of got more of my passion for OSINT from. My first job I got while I was actually in grad school was with the military, working as a civilian. And it was by no means a glamorous job. I was basically doing data entry, collections, using OSINT information. And so that's kind of how I got started. From there, I was promoted up to being an analyst, and I was focused mostly on CBRN or CBRNE work, so chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. And so I was still doing a lot of OSINT-based collections, but then I was now doing a little bit more of the OSINT cycle, right? I was doing the analysis, building reports from what I was collecting, and then disseminating it. So that's kind of how I got started. I did that for a little while, and then I transitioned into Interpol, which I think is probably the most interesting of the things I've done. So with Interpol, I was part of the team that does red notices.
What's that?
So the red notices so Interpol has different color notices. They have notices for like intel sharing, they have notices for missing people, and so red notices is like kind of like their wanted notices. So people who have committed a crime in a country, and then they assume they have fled that country. And so it's not the same as an international arrest warrant, right? It's more of like putting the other countries on notice that this person is wanted. And, so my job there was to help locate people who were wanted so that we could communicate with those other countries and help get them the people they were looking for.
Cool.
So I did that for a little while, kind of changed, went to a couple other agencies, bounced around a little bit, and then most recently found myself back at another law enforcement agency. Once again, most of my work has been involved in locating people. And this time it was more for people who were either committing violent crimes or were in the process or in the planning stage of committing violent crimes. And so my job was to locate them across the interwebs, figure out who they were, attribution, and then hopefully get them arrested before they could commit such crimes.
Okay.
And so that was actually the point at which I started joining the OSINT community on Twitter. So it was around this time that I kind of realized that there's a lot of these platforms out there that I don't know anything about, such as, Tumblr and Gab and those. So that's kind of when I started, doing more of my open source stuff, because I kind of had the fear that if I missed something, that it could cause either death or something like that. If I wasn't able to find, say, my guy. And so I was doing my regular work during the day, and then at night and on the weekends, I was kind of poking and prodding, like I said, Gab or Pinterest or those kind of places, just so I was kind of staying ahead of the curve.
Okay. And you did that for a while, and now you're doing some other things, right? And
Yeah, so
go ahead.
I just recently left that position with a law enforcement agency, and now I'm going to the private sector.
Cool. Now, let's focus a little bit about your Twitter, the tweets you've been sending, because I've actually loved some of the tweets you're sending. You post articles on SecJuice, and
Yes.
you have these wonderful flow charts of what kinds of things that you collect, and we'll see both of these when we get to the news section here. So can you tell us a little bit about when you look at a site, whether it's Tumblr or Gab or whatever, how do you pick out what there is to collect? Do you have a process for doing that, for creating those wonderful mind maps, or do you just wing it and see what happens?
So early on, yeah, there was a little bit of winging it. The process I like now, and I definitely encourage everybody to do when you go to a new website, especially if you're, maybe concerned about your operational security, is make a sock puppet account, and then in every field that you can, put some information. Don't use real information, but put something, and then fill out the entire all the fields. And then when you look at the account from the public facing area, see what shows up. So for example, if you're putting in your birthday, does it show on your profile? If you change your settings, does it hide it? Does it only show under certain settings? So that's kind of what I would do, is I'd tweak settings and then see how it would adjust what information is being displayed. Another thing I would do is to kind of go into the source code and search, just a basic Control F for the information that I fed it, to see if it does appear anywhere in the source code, because obviously that can be exploited as well if somebody knows where to look.
Okay.
Can I ask you one more question around your background? Because the red team notices they have an international aspect. Is there anything in particular that makes it, from an OSINT's perspective, hard or harder when you have to cross boundaries?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I will say is the red notices, so they vary in how much information you're going to get. There are countries who, if you look at some of the public notices that have been released, they'll give you some photos, maybe some nicknames, full date of births and stuff like that. Whereas other countries may not have the best record keeping. And so you might get a, Fanu Lanu, first name unknown, last name unknown, with no photo, and maybe just a short description of maybe he was wearing these clothes. So it really kind of varies on that aspect, what, the information you have coming in to start with. The other thing is, if you're going to, countries where the language differs, that's a really big hindrance. Interpol does have 4 main languages that they use. But not all, those are for the information sharing aspect. That doesn't necessarily mean that the people who you're looking for speak one of those 4 languages. So there's also that. So if you're not familiar with some of the local naming conventions, the local social media preferences and that kind of stuff, it can be a real hindrance.
Well, and talking about that, one of our attendees has asked the question, while working for Interpol, like finding people with the red notices, was it common that you actually did find these people, or was it very difficult? Because what they say is Interpol has some incredible databases. So
yes, so
what are your thoughts?
It varied. There were I had quite a few people. I would say, in my time there, it was definitely over 200 positives. But that's, in the sea of how many people I looked at, it's kind of a drop in the bucket, right? I would say maybe a 5% to 10% at most rate for that. So there's going to be a lot where, and it's not all, you might not find him yourself, but you might gather enough information to send on to the next person who is then able to locate that individual. So a lot of it is intelligence sharing.
And when you did these types of red notices and all, and you did OSINT on the people, did looking at social media help you find the people in those cases when you did, or was it other things? Of course, we're talking in general.
In some instances, social media could help because, when you're in any law enforcement capacity, when you're looking for somebody and they don't want to be caught, right? They're not going to use oftentimes their real names. They may not, and there are some who do, right? There are people who, do everything, including, posting a photo of their driver's license on, the profile photo with all their information. But those are not usually the case. So if it does come to the point of like finding a social media on an individual, it's usually one that they've obfuscated pretty well, and you have other information pointing you towards that.
Okay.
So when you were working in, oh, sorry, Nix. Okay, go ahead. So Sin, when you were working in Interpol and working with just so many people from so many different countries, did you find it hard to explain the concept of OSINT or the results from OSINT to certain people from certain countries, or did everyone have a basic understanding of what you were capable of doing and what OSINT is capable of?
So I think it's going to vary by the country, right? Interpol has people in France, a lot of the main, we'll call them the main Interpol folks. And then you have the NCBs, the National Center Bureaus, which are going to be at each country. So most of the people who I dealt with were going to be at my own NCB, right? So there are people there who did do a lot of OSINT, and there were people there who did no OSINT whatsoever, right? It just kind of... there wasn't necessarily a very good process for going through everything. Everyone kind of did it their own way, and for better or worse.
So during the time you were there, did you see that OSINT was gaining more importance in the work you did? Because that's something I know from a lot of the people I work with, and a lot of people in law enforcement. Over the past years, they've really seen the benefit of OSINT, and it's gaining a lot more momentum in law enforcement agencies.
Absolutely, and I think part of that is also, Michael Bazell has made a big push for that. I think even if the people in law enforcement aren't too familiar with OSINT, they at least know Michael Bazell. And so I think he's helped kind of push it, a little bit more to the forefront with law enforcement agencies. But in my experience, they're making that move, right? They're trying to incorporate it more, but I feel like a lot of them are still struggling to actually wield it well enough.
Yeah, understanding what to do with that analysis. And sometimes the analysis is not really I've seen some reports where it's data, it's just, hey, I ran this tool, here you go, look, I OSINT it. It's like, no, that's not the int part of OSINT. Yeah. I bet you've seen, well, and I guess that's another question. So I would imagine that it's at some of your previous jobs, not necessarily just at Interpol, but you worked in team settings. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges that, and I'm not asking for specific things like at Interpol they did this badly, but what are some of the challenges that you found working with other people that were doing OSINT, whether it's collection of data, the analysis together, final reports? What kind of issues or challenges did you see?
So with collections, I think one of the biggest issues I saw was false positives. So people who will run, say a username tool on a very, very common username. One that sticks out that I always have to laugh about is, someone runs anonymous through a username tool and they get all these hits and they think it's the same person, and then you have to go through and explain the concept of anonymous to somebody. So that's definitely an issue. I think that the analysis is also a really big issue because, I was lucky enough to have a background in intelligence, whereas a lot of people who are coming into this, maybe, they focused more on something else, and they may not know what to do with the information, they might have, you know, they're like, hey, I've collected all this information, but I don't know what to do with it. Can you, you know, does this confirm my assumption that this is the individual, or does it disprove, or, you know, that maybe it's not the same person? Like, I feel like that was also a pretty big issue.
Yeah, I can relate to that. We had a funny story. We once had someone running in when I was in law enforcement, like totally ecstatic. He said, "I think I found our guy. I found his IP 127. And we were all like, no.
.0.0.1.
Yeah. And we were like, go get him now.
Port scan that sucker. Yeah. Yeah. Well, but that brings up a good point, Nico and Sinwindi, is that what I find is the analysis of OSINT or any data really depends upon the experience of the person. So the more skills you have in, like you said, you know, looking in the source code of the page and just control Fing and looking for whatever you typed in, the more experience you have with other things that are sometimes not even OSINT focused, but maybe are computer or web or just other skills, can really amplify what you can do within your chosen field. Do you find that to be the case?
Yes, absolutely. So I didn't mention this earlier, but my undergraduate school was in comp sci and then art history.
Wait, what?
Art history, yeah.
Okay.
Now you know why I went to grad school. It didn't pay the bills.
Yeah. Wow. So the comp sci gave you a strong foundation of these are computers. This is how websites and databases and things work. So going into the HTML source code of a page is not that big of a deal, I would imagine.
Yeah, and you know, I laugh, but even though our history has helped, because there were certain aspects, like, you know, it's like photo manipulation and stuff that we had learned that have been really, really helpful in investigations as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, people who don't have necessarily a background in OSINT but have it in something else, there's always some way you can kind of like tie them together.
Yeah, well said. Other questions for Sin?
Yeah, I'm just curious about something you said, Sinwindi. I think you hit a really good point about the difference between just gathering data and actually analyzing it, because there are loads and loads of tools and techniques that make the gathering data easy, but the hard part is trying to make sense of it and turn it into some kind of story. For people who are listening or watching to this, what advice would you give them on becoming a sort of a good analyst? You've got the information, you know it's out there, but how do you turn it into something that's useful? What tips would you give somebody?
So I would start off by saying that if you can gather everything, because you don't know necessarily what's going to be useful in the beginning, you know, it might seem just like a photo of the guy's cat, for example, but it may help you tie it to another account later on. So gather everything you can first and foremost. When it comes to the analysis, I'm kind of a fan of competing theories. So especially early on, like, you know, if we're looking at a target account, we're trying to identify them. Is it person A or is it not person A? So going through your evidence, what do you have that supports the notion that it is person A? And then what do you have that disproves the notion that it could be person A? And just kind of like making those types of lists, I find to be very helpful. Another thing is, even though you have very small bits of information for attribution, for example, if you continue to build on them, then the likelihood it's going to be who you think it is will increase, right? So just to kind of give an example, if you're looking at an account and you know that they were at a specific place at a specific time, very specific event, and you have a list of all those people. So now you have, we'll say, 20 people who you know were at this event. You can go through that list and see what other aspects match up. Maybe, for example, you know that they drive a specific car. Then you can go through and narrow your list down of those people who were at that event who may also drive that specific kind of car. And then just kind of like, you know, narrowing it down. And you know, when you have very large groups of people, it can be very difficult to do. But you can raise your percentage of, you know, whether you think it's this person or that person, kind of that way.
So let me ask you another question. This is kind of related to a question that one of our attendees asked just now. Are there ways that you practice doing OSINT kind of outside of work, just to, like you said, you want to get better at Tumblr, you are Tumblr OSINT or something like that, or just dive into an area of the OSINT that you really haven't been doing anymore, haven't been doing previously? Are there places online that you use to get that skill, or are you at a place in your kind of career where you can just pick a website, then start pulling things apart?
For the most part, I just kind of go to a new website, and like I said, I'll start making accounts and then seeing what shows up and what doesn't. One thing that I had to kind of sort of play catch up on was like geolocation. And for that, like the daily and the weekly posts for like quiz time, I've found to be very, very helpful, especially when people show how they do it. But yeah, I think I'm kind of at the point now where I'm curious enough that if I see something I don't really know too much about, I'll just start poking around, making accounts, seeing what does and doesn't show up.
And do you have resources, just as a follow-on, do you have resources that you point to, maybe junior people or people that are coming into OSINT saying, hey, if you're gonna get into this, yeah, you need to read the blogs, but you also need to do these types of challenges or anything like that, this hands-on work to get those skills? Are there places like that you know of?
So
and if you don't, that's cool.
Yeah, not necessarily. I know one thing I will kind of harp on a bit is if you can, learn the intelligence cycle for sure. There are a lot of really good open source information that's not necessarily just related to OSINT, but the intelligence in general. So I think, watching like your local news, BBC does a bunch of great ones as well. Kind of like watch how other investigations were done. Don't F with cats, that kind of stuff, just to kind of see how other people are doing it, because there are things that, are going to differ from kind of person to person. We all kind of have our own preferences.
Maybe can I flip it around? What when you were starting out, what mistakes, well, not mistakes, did you make while trying to become better in OSINT? What was your learning curve? What tip can you give someone else? Like said, well, I tried this and it took me a year of my life and it just wasn't worth it. Right.
So don't rely on tools first and foremost, because tools break a lot and often. So that's got to be the first thing, is don't rely on tools, rely on methodologies. So learn how to investigate. The other one that, I definitely will admit to being guilty of is take your screenshots and gather your evidence first, because if you don't and the person maybe gets scared or is aware that somebody's onto them, they'll start deleting their information. And there may not be a way to gather that back again. It may not be archived elsewhere. So that's definitely another thing that I would recommend for anybody new, is to gather your information first and analyze it after the fact. And then don't rely on one source. I know Google Docs are great, but there are things that Google doesn't scrape. So try to find, even if it's as simple as going to a search engine and saying, what are some other sites like X, just to see like, kind of a different perspective. I'm not advocating for Google, or Bing Maps or anything like that, but some of them are better than others in certain situations, but none of them are the best in all situations.
Yep.
Well, some solid tips there.
Yeah, those are some solid tips, and we talk about that. The don't rely on tools, but I think one of the biggest things that I love is when you go to like somebody's GitHub page or you go to a tool's web page, and they say, "Here's a tool that does all these things. Let me show you how it works," because that's the part that I need to know is if your tool's just inserting a username into a URL, then I could just grab those URLs and try them myself. The tool will make it faster, but I understand how the tool works, and that I find is very powerful to people if they can understand what the tool does before they start using it in an assessment.
I think, Cindy, the work you've been doing so far with your mind maps, that is also for me a go-to place for OSINT beginners. Because if you're really new to some kind of platform or something, you've luckily done all this work to log on to these sites and see where the different attack vectors are. But again, just want to point out to the people listening and watching, if you're new to something, just check out these mind maps that Cinwindy put out on LinkedIn and on Twitter and a couple of other things, which information you can pull from there. Not Twitter, sorry. Yeah, go. That'd be great. Because I think that would be one of the best tips I would give to a person that is new when investigating a certain website.
So this is Cinwindy's GitHub, and I'll turn it over to you. Ooh, sorry, Cinwindy. I'll turn it over to you. Which one of these in the OSINT repository? So github.com/cinwindy/OSINT, for those of you that are listening on the podcast, has a bunch of directories, and in those directories are files. Cinwindy, is there one of these that you'd like to just look at right now?
I think the Pokemon Go one's actually a really good one.
Let's go to
personally
there. And what do you want, the attack surface PDF or the techniques?
The attack surface.
You got it.
So those are the mind maps.
All right, you want to talk us through this?
So, like I said, I'll make an account and then I'll kind of go and see what I can and can't see on that account from an outside perspective. So if we start kind of in the middle, Pokemon Go account, to start, what pieces of information can you gather? What are the big pieces? And the big pieces are really screenshots, because people, if you go to social media, Twitter, Instagram, they will post so many screenshots of themselves in the games. And a lot of those don't give you a whole lot of information. For example, the stats. The stats on an account might not show you anything more than, how long they've been playing, which for most purposes, that's really nothing. But if you're trying to determine maybe when something occurred, or if they were maybe they were playing at a certain time, that might be useful. But then you have the things such as the overhead map, where people are playing, and it's, this game is geo-based. So they'll post maps, and it pulls from it's OpenStreetMaps. So you can actually pull up OpenStreetMaps and kind of guide yourself around and find where these people are taking their screenshots at. And so, that narrows down your location sometimes significantly. You can say they were at a certain place at a certain time, assuming the user was not spoofing their location, right?
Right.
So, things such as, looks like I'm missing some lines on this one, but
it might be that I've zoomed out.
Yeah, that's what it is. Seems like username, you can run that kind of stuff through your username tools. I like to treat these, I know people you guys call them mind maps. I kind of try to treat it like a checklist. So these are all the things as I'm going through an investigation for an account. These are things that I'm kind of telling myself, hey, this is something I should look at, because it may have information or the account may not show it, but this kind of serves as a checklist for me to make sure that I don't miss anything.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things about these mind maps, or these checklists, as you call them, is that it really does depend. When you're not giving away what about gym badges is important, or what is an X-rayed pass and why should I care, but that might be is that in the other PDF maybe?
Yes. So okay. A lot of the especially the earlier ones I did also included PDFs through SecJuice. And so what I would do is I would go through each piece on the mind map or the checklist, and I would tell you kind of here's what it looks like and here's what you can do with it. And then I would take the example in the photo and then show people how you would run that through. So in that example, it shows the OpenStreetMaps location based on where the user is currently at in the game.
Yep. That's terrific. And you said that's for some of the older ones, and maybe it hasn't been done as much for the newer ones, right?
Correct. I think all of them should have them, with the exception of Instagram and Pinterest, if I remember correctly. The only two that don't have a write-up for.
Okay. And just for our audience here, what is the usage for this? Can people take this and do you want, what is the license for other people using these?
It's open.
Okay.
I think that for me, like I said, I was worried about not knowing kind of ahead of time this kind of information. So, obviously I would definitely like for anybody who's doing this for their job to use it if they can. if it helps you get ahead of the curve, especially because you don't always necessarily have time to go back and do this kind of research before you're going to need it.
Yeah. And these definitely are helpful, especially, I mean, they kind of fill the gap for what you had talked about earlier, where I haven't done OSINT on Tumblr at all, and I could come in here, see what you suggest I do, and then use that information as a launching point.
Yeah, and for me also, these reminded me of the flowcharts that Bazel used to have online. Only these one from St. Winnie have another perspective. For me, well, like you said yourself, it's more of a checklist, which really helps me to keep track of, did I do this? Did I do that? And not as a process, should I go left or right, but more when I go left, what should I do once I took the left lane?
Yeah.
Yeah, really
great.
valuable.
Absolutely. So, Sinwindi, we are getting towards the end of our interview section here. We always ask our guests one question, and that is, what are you looking to learn better or more deeply or whatever within the world of OSINT? What is on your plate?
For sure, non-Western country work. So I would like to be able to do more work that's kind of international in the sense of maybe different languages or different platforms that we don't use necessarily in the Western world. And another thing I would really like to be able to get better at is, we're getting more experience in, would be big data. So large, very, very large data sets, and then visualization of such large data sets.
Okay. Yeah, I just, not to shift to me or anything, but I'm giving a talk at Layer 8 this weekend where I have 39 million records that I'm working with, and it was a big learning curve to figure out how to, go through that set and just pull out stuff. But it's good stuff. It's definitely a neat skill set to have. So terrific. Well, thank you so much for being on here, Sin. And we're going to go ahead and shift over to doing some news now. We would love for you to stick around. And for those of you that don't know him, this is Sin's Twitter handle, Sinwindie, Sin, SINWINDIE. And you can see it on the screen if you are watching the video. So please follow him. And also, this is the Set Juice page I think you just mentioned a little bit ago. And there's a bunch of great articles on here that are really in depth.
Yeah, and all of these links will be in the show notes. So for people listening on the podcast,
excellent.
Take a look at the show notes.
Cool. Well, let's get into the news. We need like a teletype thing, like yeah, not that, Nico. No, whatever that was. Don't do that any. So one of the sorry. One of the first things that we need to do here is thank a couple new Patreons that we have that are supporting our project. Joel, Julio, Riley, and Adam joined our Patreons this past week, and we had a happy hour. Got to talk to some of them. So thank you for supporting us. Now, we are going to go into some news articles that we found this past week. The first is about eBay port scanning visitors. Ooh,
yeah,
interesting.
It was by Namek. He also does a lot of open source intelligence. But well, honestly, my first initial reaction to this article was, "Is this new?" Like, large companies, as far as I know, have been doing these things for ages.
You want to tell them a little bit about what they're doing?
Well, they're trying to detect, let's say, not that well protected ports on your personal or company's computer to see what they can learn from it, how they can gain access, for instance, or just in general learn from it from a commercial perspective, of course, because this is eBay in this case. So, and it's not new port scanning, but well, I think nowadays when privacy and GDPR has become more and more common, people are just more frustrated about it when large companies do these things like on a sneaky way and not out in the open. And that's what happened here. Yeah.
So this is another way for them to fingerprint your client computer when you're just browsing stuff. It's not like you're scanning or attacking their site. You're just visiting their site, and they want to know that you are Dutch OSINT guy.
Yeah.
And Dutch OSINT guy always has these ports open on the computer, right?
Yeah.
I know there are also a lot of countries where there is discussion if port scanning in general is a lawful action. Especially in Germany, there are a lot of opinions that are like, okay, if port scanning is illegal, you can't really do that. But this only comes up if some script kiddie plays around and does stuff like this. And I found this very interesting to see that major corporations are constantly doing this, and no one really cares about it or didn't look into it. Or I assume a lot of people that think it's illegal don't really know what they're talking about. That might also be one of the reasons.
Yeah, but in essence, it's the same, right? Like I can walk to a street here now and just look which people have a window or a door open. And I can look and I can write down, well, house number 50 has this window open. House number 51 has this door open. Not entering, because when I cross, that's for me, that's crossing the line. Entering is crossing the line, but I can certainly look around.
But don't forget that a port scan without entering is impossible. So at the moment you find the port is open, data has been transferred already.
Well, but that would probably be analogous to, like, I can look through your window and see what's inside your house. Yeah. I'm not grabbing stuff if the window's open or if the door's open. I'm just seeing what's in there. But I think the real world metaphor really breaks down in that I know how to close my door. I know how to pull down the shade, but you ask me how to close local host ports on my computer, that's going to be more challenging, because that's not necessarily something that I have control over. That would be my browser, right?
Yeah, agreed.
And that's Firefox or Chrome. Or
and
whatever.
if it is unsolicited and it is actually creating a fingerprint of something that belongs to you that can tie the machine to a specific household, then I think they actually have a larger problem than just being naughty people.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of naughty people, I like that for a segue. Let's talk about Benjamin Strick.
Yeah.
Ben Strick, one of our past advisory board members. Ben he wrote this really cool article that is a step-by-step guide. This is the tweet that he sent out. I'll go ahead and click on the link. For those of you that are listening, it's at benjaminstrick.com, and we'll have the note in the show notes. But here he talks about how he finds Twitter accounts to go ahead and do some research on, then shows you using simple tools how to go ahead and do that research. What did y'all think of this?
Well, I honestly, every now and then I talk to Benjamin, and I always try to make him either work with me on a case or make a write-up of the way he does it, because I've written similar blogs about scraping Twitter and visualizing it, but I just wanted to see his methodology. I just wanted to know, and now finally he did it. So what I found particularly interesting is that he writes up, first of all, he monitors through TweetDeck just based on, let's say, global breaking news or niche news that he is interested in, the way his team works from the BBC African Eye. And then he uses a specific methodology by using Twint, for instance, as a scraping tool for Twitter, and then analyzing that data or data set in a visualization tool like Gephi, and then pivoting off to drilling down on, for instance, a specific bot network or a usage of phishing links or whatever, and then he writes up what the narrative of that analysis is. And well, it has been pretty successful, because I think he by himself is now responsible for taking down 3 or 4 large bot networks on the largest platforms like Twitter and Facebook. So this is a solid methodology. So if you want to learn open source intelligence and an analysis of large scale groups online, this is, I think, your number one stop for now to really read up.
Well, and also he uses free tools, and he shows you how to take the existing things that you might already be doing. A lot of people already use TweetDeck. Well, he shows you a way of tweaking the settings so that you get, more detailed content that's more refined, and then taking that and scraping it out and doing each one of these steps. I love his work. It's not one of these teaser things. It's like, hey, look what I can do because I have this multi-$1,000 per year product. It's really accessible stuff.
This to me is actually the art of OSINT. So not just the whole methodology he describes, but also, the stuff he puts out later, these visualizations, just all the effort and the time and the analysis that goes in there is just amazing. And they look great. I mean, I've said this before, one day I'm going to make an exhibition with the art of OSINT where people have their stuff printed on canvas. And
Nice.
I think Ben's going to be in there with a lot of pictures as well.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I have done some, and those of you that make blogs, those of you that do these Gephi analyses, all of it takes time. And the amount of content that he has in there and how he's put in position stuff really shows his talent as a journalist as well. So let's move over to something from Access OSINT, who I believe is one of our guests today. This is looking at what's inside of those PowerPoint presentations and the data that's in there. Because one thing that people may not know, which is discussed in the article, is that when you upload a picture into PowerPoint or upload an object into PowerPoint and then you scale it, you crop it, well, that doesn't remove the other content. It's still there. So if you upload a picture of like a financial spreadsheet and you crop it so that only the public area is showing, if somebody gets that document, they can uncrop it and see all that content coming out. Did you all have a chance to take a look at what Access did here?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, there's so much information, especially in Microsoft Office documents, just the metadata itself for the document, where you can get information on the users and sometimes company structures and the printers they're using. And then this approach, just going into the document and seeing what's in there is really cool. And of course, it's not just PowerPoint. It's probably basically any Office document, any DocX or XLS or something like that, which has these elements which you can use to get information. So I really like someone writing all this together, just in a quick and easy way, so people really understand there's a lot more to a PowerPoint or a DocX or whatever than meets the eye.
Yeah, if you look at my last week's newsletter, the OXML types from Microsoft Office, the DocX, PPT, X, etc. Those are just zip files, XML files with loads of metadata inside. You can even probably distinguish the OS someone uses, whether it's Windows or Linux based, or maybe even Mac OS, depending on the directory structure that you can find inside XML files. And open format, I think it's open document format, it's called, from OpenOffice and LibreOffice, has the same thing. Just unzip it with 7-zip, and there's a whole world of information out there.
What this blog also immediately reminded me of was a tool which I always forget to use. I always use it as last resource, Foca.
Oh, that's the oldie but goldie.
Yeah, the oldie but gold, and especially the older version, the 3.0. Yeah, the 3.0 version. And wow, if I'll put it in the show notes, it's just really powerful once you.
I hear a 10-minute tip coming on.
Yep.
Maybe, yeah.
And one thing I also want to. Oh, sorry, Micah.
No, go ahead.
No, one thing I also want to point out is that a lot of people also nowadays save their documents as a PDF from Microsoft Office. So like whenever you find a PDF, just try to open it in Office, and you might also get back to the original Microsoft Office state, which I haven't tried if it has the cropped images extractable, but it basically still is the Microsoft Office document, just saved as a PDF, which can easily be transformed back. So I do that often to take out like things that are blacked out. That's an easy way. So just combining these two, redacted stuff. So combining these two methods with what Access OSINT showed us now, that'd be awesome.
That is cool. Now, Access is one of our attendees today, and he says that he did try to do that, but he believes that once it's in a PDF format, that cropping is removed. So, but it's definitely an area to research. Let's talk a little bit about OSINT Combine. OSINT Combine, in a tweet this past week, shows how to shows you how to enable cookie blocking in Chrome's incognito mode. Did y'all secure your Chromes this week? Yeah,
Yep.
I see some head nods for those of you that are listening. Yeah, you know this is a podcast too,
Yes,
people. You've
we
got
did.
to say it. Okay. All right. And OSINT Combine also released another tool that was an enhancement of the visualization tool that he released earlier. Now, I think Nix or Matthias, one of you, I think Nix, you brought up this security trails thread, which was cool about going into infrastructure. You want to talk about it?
Yeah. For people who haven't heard of them, Security Trails are they're a big data company. They have huge archive of whose information and historic DNS records, which means you can go look either in the current day or back in time and see where websites were hosted, which subdomains they have, which IP addresses they're associated to, and so on. So if you're doing any investigations of websites or domains, things like that, then Security Trails is probably one of the resources that you always want to include. But this thread is really good because it's quite to the point, it's very systematic, but they start to look at the infrastructure behind WeChat.com, which is also the Chinese website. And just starting from that domain, WeChat.com, they go through whois information, DNS information, they pick out subdomains, they pick out open ports, SSL certificates, all these little building blocks. We've seen them in, we didn't see it this time, but I think Sinwindi has a really great diagram that shows these little structural points. And Security Trails had just gone through each of these points and show how to build quite a detailed profile of a website and a company in quite a short amount of time. It's really useful.
Nice. And while I've got you on the line there, Nix, do you want to tell us about your thread on geolocation that you tweeted out?
Yeah, this was a little exercise on lunchtime this week. But geolocation is really difficult. It's becoming, I said, much bigger part of OSINT investigation than it ever was in the past, just because of the abundance of imagery that is now out there. But geolocation is difficult when it's outdoors. If you ever try and geolocate something that is indoors, it's really, really hard. But a little tip that I came across is actually looking at plug sockets. Because it's something I have used in real life in the past, but I'd never looked into it in much detail. But there are basically only 14 different types of plug socket in the world, and all different countries have their own distinctive shapes and patterns. Some are really, really common that get used by dozens of countries. Some are really, really rare. So if you were to look at a photo and pick out some of these little plug socket types, you would be able to identify either which country the image was taken in, or at least eliminate a lot of possible countries that it was not taken in. So like Israel have their own unique type of plug socket. Who knew that? But I will always be able to identify a Israeli plug from now on. But yeah, it's really well put together little website, iec.ch. But yeah, there's tons of information on there and all you could ever want to know about plugs. But if you are ever trying to look at something that's located inside from it and extract those little details for intelligence purposes, it's a really useful resource.
Excellent. And thanks for sharing.
I really like the perspectives on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely. Well, it's one of those interesting side things. You don't think about it. You're like, yeah, you know what? Something that's country specific would be really useful if I have an image from inside of an office or something in a certain place. So that's great, man.
But now I'm looking at your guys' backgrounds and trying to find the sockets.
It's right there. Yeah, people are going to go back through all of our videos. Go through all of our videos and see what countries we're from.
Mine would be pretty hard to guess.
Yeah, Dutch OSINT guy. So OSINT Combine again in these past 2 weeks released another update to the data visualizer. On OSINT Combine tool. I'm just going to head over there. I actually did a couple of demos with this, and I love the fact that this is all within a web browser. Now, this is not a tool that you're going to be able to, let's say, upload 30,000 or 30 million nodes for analysis. He did it, but it almost burned up his computer because this is all in your browser, your web browser. I think
he stated that it should be somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 nodes for now, and he's trying to expand it.
Yeah, and the idea here is that this works much very similar to the link analysis tool. This is a data visualization tool, but you can put anything in here as far as usernames, phone numbers, and everything stays in your browser. It doesn't get sent to his site. It's really good stuff. And then once you add these things manually or via CSV, you get these wonderful little nodes, and the nodes you can right click on, and then you can go ahead and do some additional searches. For those of you that have ever played with Maltego or Spiderfoot's Investigate, this is a very similar thing. But again, here it's all free and it's all coming from your web browser. So there's no extra things that are being sent to his website. This is all on your site. And you know, with the username, he knows, or he has figured out how to add that username to Yandex search or Twitter search and all. Let's just check it out. Oh, I don't know if you can see that. But it has, it's gone and done a Google search, a Yandex or a Twitter search. So he has all this, it's all free on OSINTcombine.tools, the data visualization tool, and you can upload CSVs. I love that. He does great work.
Yeah, he's kind of on fire lately.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Sector, you, I think, sent this thing because, well, you wrote it. You want to tell us a little bit about getting a grip on Google IDs?
Yeah, I've been waiting for literally like 6 to 8 weeks, just continuously being busy with work and private things, and I really wanted to have part 2 out there because there's still so much to discover about Google Gaia IDs, what they are called, the unique identifier within Google. And it's so easy to use, especially I use Hangouts to get someone's ID, and you can immediately see whether they are connected, that account is connected to a YouTube account or Google Maps, for instance, so you know where you can target your searches. So instead of just finding out the full name and the avatar and all that, you can actually find more information if you know where to look for. And besides that, I found out that whether you have a Hotmail address or an AOL account or whatever, you can still be found via Google if you connected it once to, for instance, a YouTube app. Because you can do that. You can use an external email address to connect to YouTube, and Google will assign you a perfect number, and you can just find people there.
Yeah. And it looks like you're using web developer tools. That's what these types of screenshots are, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Besides proxies and web developers tools, yeah, my life would be really boring.
Cool. All right, so take a look at Sector's. This is in his week in OSINT, but it's actually a blog, Keeping a Grip on Google IDs. Now, going back to Nix, can you tell us what this Google Doc is?
I can. This is the first version of the OSINT Curious project resource list. Now, anyone who's been following us for a while will know that we put out a lot of material. All those of us who are part of the project, we write blog posts on how to do OSINT stuff, and there's loads of 10-minute tip videos that we put on YouTube over the last, I guess, 18 months, 2 years or so. And for the first time, we put everything all in one place. So this was sort of a cheat sheet to access all our resources. It lists all the videos that we've done. It lists all the blog posts that we've written, and they're sorted by topic. So we'll make the link for this available as part of the show notes. But if you open up the document, and there's a menu on the left-hand side, which will take you to the theme that you're interested in. So if you want to learn about how to investigate a website, we put a load of resources for that. If you want to learn about Linux, and we put a load of resources about that. And as we go on and continue to put more material out onto YouTube and onto our blog, then we'll add the resources in there. So whenever you're scratching your head about where to go next, what to do next, or you just want to learn an OSINT skill that you haven't already, then add this to your bookmarks, and there'll be something in there to help you, hopefully.
That is absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for putting in the time to do that.
You know, it was really useful because I had to like read every blog and watch every video to do. I actually learned a ton of stuff doing that.
That's one way to get him to read the blogs. Nix is going to be making a really nice custom short URL, so we'll be able to say bit.ly/whatever it is. Stay tuned to our OSINT Curious Twitter account for that special link, or it'll be in the show notes, of course. And then lastly, we have Ray Baker. Wondersmith Ray, one of our advisory board members, learning to track disinformation and bot activity in Twitter. Now, Ray, disinformation reminds me of a previous guest that we had. Have any of you read Ray's blog post here? No.
No.
Not so far. I was on the phone with her before, and I promised to read it, but I didn't have the time. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of stuff out there. And she mentions that, on a recent episode of OSINT Curious, we talked with Jane Litvinenko from BuzzFeed. And so that inspired Ray to go ahead and take a deeper look at some disinformation out there using link analysis and other things. And sometimes blog posts are just for us to practice using tools that we've never used before. And so there's some learning that goes into this. But a good blog post, I would highly suggest you take a look at it. You might find some other new ways of looking at Twitter data.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then lastly, we have Axis OSINT again, who has put some new levels in for Game 15 on sourcing.game. Now, when we were talking with Sin Wendy earlier, we mentioned, or actually one of the questions that was posed was, what resources are out there for people that are looking to test their skills? And of course, there's the quiz time challenges, but there's also places like sourcing.games that has OSINT challenges. And I think at least one of you all, one of our OSINT Curious members has done stuff with sourcing.games, right?
Yeah, I've played them before. Yeah, I've played a few levels, but he's got so many levels out there. It will take me days to go over. But it's really, really simply set up. It's very easy to do, and anyone can start even from number one. It begins with some simple hack me's. Sometimes I think you even have to dive into JavaScript or into the source code of a page. You have to find people on LinkedIn and stuff like that. It covers a whole bunch of things.
Excellent. And thank you for that again, Josh, Axis OSINT. Really appreciate all you're doing to keep us in the OSINT training and OSINT learning. And that's all the news we have. We have one more bit of news, which we've already mentioned before, but we'll throw it in here anyway. This coming Friday, June 5th, we OSINT Curious members are doing a training over in, online through Zoom, and you can register for it if you're interested in a one-day training for basic OSINT skills. They're basic, but they're not basic. So these are like core skills, I should say. And here we're going to have Kirby and Technizet, myself, Matthias, Ray Baker, all talking about, in Ginsberg 5150, talking about some ways to set up systems, create sock puppets, dive into social media and all. We have a few spaces left for the class, so if you're interested, just Google WorkshopCon and OSINT Curious, or of course look at our show notes. And with that, we have gone through an entire hour's worth of material, gentlemen. Well done. So I would like to thank our guest Sin Wendy for being on and for answering panelists' question and our attendees' questions. Thank you, Sin Wendy, for being here.
Sure thing.
And we are in the shameless self-promotion section of our webcast. I'll go with Nix. Do you have any places where people can go to see or hear from you in the next couple of weeks?
The only place I plan on being this week will be on Twitter as usual. I will be at Nixtintel, and I hope to have some new blog material coming out shortly, but we'll see.
Excellent. And Matthias?
I just hope to see some of you at our upcoming OSINT training on Friday. So like Micah said, there are still a couple spots left, and please join because it's going to be a fun ride with us.
Yeah, It's going to be a lot of material. I looked at the schedule and like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. Nico.
One thing, on July 9th, I've got a workshop coming up with aware-online.com about advanced Google searching. And also online, of course.
And at what's your Twitter handle?
Dutch_OSINTguy.com.
Dutch_OSINT And Sector 035, where can we find you this week?
Well, Sector 035, Medium, of course, tomorrow newsletter, Twitter, of course, but where I'll hope to rant a little bit less. And then I'm also going to be really busy for our website and maybe creating some new blogs. Hopefully Nix is going to help me out with something nice that people would really like to learn a bit more about, and going to maybe make some videos.
That sounds like a busy week for you. And I will be at Layer 8 teaching on the June 5th. And I will also be speaking at the Layer 8 conference, which is an online conference now. It's in the Eastern time zone, but it's open to anybody around the world with very reasonable ticket prices. That's layer8conference.com. Myself and Ray Baker, one of our advisory board members, are going to be speaking. And I looked at the schedule. I wish I'd brought it up here. Yeah. I looked at the schedule. It is an amazing schedule. They got 3 tracks going concurrently. All of the talks are going to be recorded, so I highly suggest, if you like OSINT, spend some time on Saturday attending these live. Nico, you saw them too?
I saw the lineup, and I was like, wow, this is really impressive. I'm also looking for it because I know we've talked about your talk, and I'm very much looking forward because you've been working on this for quite some time. So raising the bar a little bit, man.
Yeah, thanks man. Now, if only I could make those slides. Oh, procrastination. Well, I'd like to thank our guest once more. Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists here and to our attendees for helping us with this webcast. I've been Micah Hoffman, and there's only one thing left to say, everybody. That's stay
OSINT curious.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.